Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Nick.
And I'm Alistair.
And in this fortnight's episode, I'm not going to lie to you, we almost did Venom, but we didn't in the end because, to be honest, it's been two quite negative episodes on the trot, and also, as I said, someone seems to like it when we don't do superheroes. So instead, we are doing the BBC's new comedy/drama, but mostly drama, Killing Eve, a spy series written by Fleabag's Phoebe Waller-Bridge about a British intelligence agent who finds herself somewhat obsessively pursuing the charismatic and terrifying assassin Villanelle. And then we'll be asking the related spy question, what can James Bond learn from Killing Eve? But before that, Alistair, what else have you been doing this fortnight?
Well, I've been listening to a new album, one that will have been out, I think, for a week by the time listeners get this podcast. It's the latest album from a punk band I really like, with the amazing name of Fucked Up. So yeah, the new album from Fucked Up is called Dose Your Dreams. We might have discussed the band briefly on the podcast before, as the two of us went to see Fucked Up at the Hackney Mirrors Festival a few years ago.
Was this the one where it basically turned into a massive moshing pool and I got bored and wandered off?
I think so, yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a few years ago, but this is their latest album. Like I say, it's called Dose Your Dreams, and it's really, really good. It's a bit of a departure for them. They're a fairly sort of heavy punk band, but yeah, and there's lots of, like sort of thrashing and screaming as you'd expect, but they've also been a bit more experimental with this album, bringing in sort of, like more harmonies between the members and singing and some more electronic sounds and a bit more experimentation. So it's got all the fucked up stuff that you like, but also some interesting sort of new stuff that kind of complements the existing stuff really well. So I must say I am very much enjoying it.
I mean, a lot of people seem to turn up and fight with them at that gig we were at, so I assume they've been going for a while. This is their,
Yeah, it's like 7th or 8th album.
Okay, a high number of albums.
I haven't listened to all of them, but they did a great album a few years ago called David Comes to Life. So yeah, I listened to that one quite a lot. And yeah, it's a punk band, so as you expect it, when we saw them live, it was pretty raucous. And yeah, even amongst punk bands, they're sort of heavier, faster and shoutier than a lot of punk bands, which is really saying something. But like I say, the early albums, although were really, really good at the heavy, fast, shouty punk, whereas this one, like I say, they still do that, but they've, varied it a bit with some more electronic stuff, some slower bits.
Is this a polite way of saying they've reached a stage every band gets to where they've gotten slightly older and decide to mellow the music out?
Maybe, yeah. Or there's a thing when you you start doing one thing and then this is what we want to do, and then after a few albums you might feel well, we do want to do something different. There's a great documentary about the history of punk called Punk Attitude, and there's an interview in that at one point when they're talking to one person, and I think it makes a point that the thing is, if you're in a band and you're playing together all the time and you're getting better at your instruments and you're learning, and then there's an element when you want to start experimenting and you want to maybe start trying something new because as you're technically progressing. But then punks as fans can be some very intolerant fans and just get really pissed off if you deviate from, sort of 3 chords fast and thrashing them out. But like I say, for a lot of bands, they do reach a point where they want to try something new, and maybe they're at this point now.
But it's not so new that there's going to be a rebellion at gigs where the fans start screaming, that wasn't fucked up at all, and then throw their pints out.
Yeah, there's not going to be any Judas moments like when Dylan went electric. It's not like that. But then again, it's the sort of thing I don't know if we can be shocked by musicians anymore.
Probably not.
Yeah, Dylan went electric. The Ramones and the Sex Pistols tore down prog. They're not the first punk band to be a bit more experimental. And as friend of the podcast, Alan Ashton Smith said to me, he was one who suggested I listen to this album, and yeah, thanks for the recommendation. It's a really good album. We were talking about punk, and he was saying, back in the 70s when the Sex Pistols and the Ramones, when they made punk, the very stripped down sort of pure punk, it's been done. They showed us how to do it, and another band doing that is just, it's not revolutionary the way it was in the 70s. So there is a sort of a need amongst punk to be innovative to a degree, because you can't just do what the Sex Pistols did because it's been done.
Well, yeah, that's true, I suppose. That's why whenever you see people, you go to, I don't know, I was just going to insult a bunch of people and there's no real point.
Well, that's pretty punk.
Yeah, punk in a way that will get me beaten up.
Well, it's a good thing it's a podcast and they're not here.
It's true. What are the odds for any of them or one of our 40 listeners?
Well, we'll find out, I guess, in the comments in the comment section for this podcast.
Hi, guys.
Yeah, in short, Dose Your Dreams is very good, and if you like your punk fast, loud, shouty but also with a bit of interesting experimentation, then I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah, I'm getting a bit bored of my current music, so maybe I'll give it a go. You never know. See if I remember it next time I'm on Spotify.
Anyway, that's been me. Nick, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Well, since we have covered basically all of the Marvel Netflix Defenders shows since we started doing the podcast, in fact, I think we've covered basically all of them as they came out, except maybe the very first series of Daredevil and Jessica Jones. Yeah, I guess I better talk about the fact I've been watching the second season of Iron Fist.
All right.
Yeah, I've seen the first 6 episodes, I think, which is, because this is a wisely shortened 10-episode season, is over half of it. Yeah, basically, last season they tried to make some sort of weird new premium telly, martial arts / corporate drama crossover hybrid show. It didn't really work, especially the corporate part. So this season, they brought in a new showrunner, and he's basically made a season of Arrow instead. It's now basically an urban vigilante show where a man jumps off rooftops and fights other people with superpowers. And yeah, it's pretty much the path of least resistance for a show like this. It's, in some ways, it's basically Daredevil with a bit more martial arts and a bit less angst. But it's a semi-competent rendition of that, so it's not amazing, but I've seen worse seasons of Arrow, to be honest.
Yeah, I've seen the first episode, and you can definitely tell the sort of direction they're taking the second series from the first episode. I haven't seen much more than that, but it did, I think, certainly have more promise than the first episode of season 1. So far, do you think it is better? Is that what you're saying? Have they improved?
It's definitely better. I've seen a few review headlines saying things like, Iron Fist season 2, better, but still not good. And kind of, yeah, it's definitely now just a sort of okay urban vigilante fighty show instead of a really bad corporate angst weird show. Are you actually watching Iron Fist season 2, or did someone just have it on in the room?
No, I'm watching it. I've only had time to watch one episode.
Did you go back and watch the second half of season 1 then?
No, I just thought. Or just because I've seen The Defenders, and I think I know all the twists.
That there were no twists. That's the twist.
I mean, I might go back and finish season 1.
I wouldn't. It's 6 fucking hours.
No.
Yeah, anyway, Iron Fist season 2, yeah. In some ways, it's a bit more exciting than some of the other Netflix shows, in that there's more than one superpowered villain, and some actually quite good fight scenes in times. They have realised that if their thing is going to be martial arts, they should really put some money behind the action, and they do seem to have finally done that, which they hadn't really done in season 1, which was kind of bad. It's still a bit Netflixy slow, but even that has slightly improved with the move to a 10-episode season. Like, by the halfway mark, a few major plot developments have definitely happened, thank God. So, yeah, it's now an okay urban vigilante show. It's not really redefining anything, and to be honest, if you're already watching Daredevil and or Arrow, it's possible you may not need another show, which is a bit like both of them, only not as good.
Well, it certainly sounds like I'll persevere with it, and I'm glad it's better than the previous series.
It is definitely better, I'll give it that. Although, they've definitely made the lead character, Danny, a bit less annoying.
Yeah, that was a problem with the first series.
Yeah, he's now more sort of slightly generic chill bro, rather than irritating pain in the arse. So far, he was more interesting in his one-off appearance in Luke Cage than he has been in this entire run of his own show. But what you gonna do? I'll say this about it. If it can keep roughly this level of quality, it might on some scales be slightly better, in my opinion, than season 2 of Jessica Jones, just because it is succeeding at what it's trying to do. It's just what it's trying to do isn't very ambitious.
Yeah.
Whereas I thought Jessica Jones really kind of shat the bed.
Yeah, that's...
Like season 2. Other people, I think, liked it more than me, but I thought Jessica Jones season 2 was, as I say, kind of a shit show.
Well, we've got an episode. You can go back and find out exactly what we thought of it. But yeah, that was not a positive review.
What, bit of a shit show.
Yeah, I don't think we actually used that phrase. But yeah, you're right that I thought the second series of Jessica Jones was a colossal letdown, especially considering the quality of the first series. And I know it was aspiring to a lot, but it just had some sort of like basic problems. Like it changed, like the character of Trish, they just kind of changed completely for seemingly no reason. You know, if Iron Fist season 2 can have basic competency, then it will probably be better than Jessica Jones season 2.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, Iron Fist season 2 can only be better compared to season 1, whereas Jessica Jones, very possibly, was always going to wrestle with only being able to be worse. So, you know, it's probably not really a fair comparison. My views going into each one were probably quite different. Anyway, so yes, I've got 4 episodes left. I'll watch them. Should be good.
Cool.
Should continue to be okay.
Do let us know. First up, this episode, we'll be talking about the new BBC spy drama, Killing Eve. The show follows Eve, played by Sandra Oh, who uncovers the existence of an international assassin, Villanelle, played by Jodie Comer, and is then hired by MI6 to track her down. This becomes something of an obsession for Eve as she attempts to uncover the true identity of the assassin. Unfortunately for Eve, the assassin has developed an obsession of her own for Eve. We've seen all 8 episodes of the first series, so Nick, what did you think of it?
Yeah, this was very good. I think the charm and characterisation is definitely everything here. Long-term listeners may remember last episode that Alistair briefly covered this in his What I've Been Watching section, and as he said, are making, the spies feel like real people who turn up to work hungover, argue about a croissant, and that is just, the first few minutes of episode 1. Does sort of very much lead into the general angle of the show, which is that these are actual human beings having, snippy little conversations and taking phone calls on the toilet, actually being as shocked and terrified as you would be if you were trying to face off with this terrifying international assassin. Yeah, it's definitely all about the charm and characterisation here, to the extent that the actual plot is sometimes a bit predictable and arguably even at times a bit shonky. I'm sure I can nitpick later. But basically you're here for the jokes and the fact that everyone, all the characters, especially the main two women, Sandra Oh and Jodie Comer, are incredibly charismatic and incredibly charming and funny, and I think it does have flaws, but they're flaws you're prepared to kind of forgive, because to be honest, they're not really why you're watching the show.
Yeah. I'd agree with all of that. Yeah, I think the real star here is probably Phoebe Waller-Bridge's writing, in that she's managed to create something that's very, very believable and filled with like sort of ordinary human interactions, and also be like a spy drama. I've put down that this is the believable, unbelievable spy drama, in the sense that like they do really work hard to make it seem ordinary and seem like like these are regular people with regular lives, especially the Eve character, her colleagues and friends.
Yeah.
And then obviously, because the fundamental premise is fairly unbelievable, in the sense, there's international spies going around who works for some secret, shady, possibly anarchist, I don't know, possibly something else, cell called the 12, and this assassin is like going around picking off key figures as part of their diabolical plan. I mean, the spy plot itself it's not unbelievable, the spy plots go, but I'd say, like, in terms of spy stories, it's like less believable than the plot of like a Smiley novel or TV show like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. But the idea is this fundamentally unbelievable story is just wrapped up in such a sort of everyday execution. You can't not believe that this is exactly how this works, and this is what these people are like, because of so many experiences that they have, little things that are similar to what things we recognise, like, being hungover at work, or like conversations they have like in like a canteen while people microwaving soup, and like the MI5 canteen just looks like regular canteen. So yeah, it does give the whole thing this kind of believability despite its sort of unbelievability.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, aside from the idea of international assassins, who I'm sure do exist in some form, I gather they use radiation or something.
Well, they're just stupid. Like there's the two Russian assassins who poisoned the Skripovs in Salisbury. When asked why they're in Salisbury, they just reel off the Wikipedia page for Salisbury. So yeah, it's just like, I don't think anyone's as like clever, charming, talented and deadly as Villanelle.
Are they stupid, or are they geniuses?
I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, obviously, even aside from her, yes, the fact that she's a smooth, sexy, charming international assassin of the sort that probably doesn't exist. The way she does her work, obviously, with her magic killer perfume and her, a hairpin full of poison. Yeah. That's definitely, getting into James Bond territory. Yeah. And the fact that they're able to have that coexist alongside, as you say, what is often a sort of workplace dramedy with the MI5 stuff. The fact that all this sort of hangs together is, as you say, a sort of testament to the fact that how Phoebe Waller-Bridge and the other writers who write a few of the other episodes have kind of balanced it.
It's interesting. The whole thing is it's less slick than the average hospital or legal drama, whereas I think when you make spy shows, there's a temptation to make them, super slick. Like, I guess the obvious one to contrast this with is Spooks, another BBC British spy drama. That one's focused on MI5. Whereas Eve starts out working for MI5 and then I think is moved to MI6 when she uncovers the existence of Villanelle. But yeah, the Spooks was just, everything was like slick and high tech, and it was just trying to make basically spies look as cool as possible, with a sort of veneer of, the Matthew McFadden character has like a girlfriend and he has to pretend he's not a spy to her and things. But
they keep having breakdowns. There's a lot of people having sort of nervous breakdowns in Spooks, but it never feels that relatable. It's always very sort of, oh god, my angst. I've just killed so many people and I'm so sad.
Yeah, and the rest is just this. There's always like lots of gadgets and stuff, and like clever sort of spy tricks and things like that. And I understand why it was the early 2000s. Everyone wanted to make like high tech spy dramas, and it was a very good show at the time, especially the first couple of series. It's very entertaining, but the kind of the emphasis on the slickness. It's interesting to contrast that to Killing Eve, where they deliberately make it look. The office of Killing Eve bears more resemblance to the office of The Office than even to something like a legal or medical drama, let alone the sort of vogue for spy films or spy TV.
I mean, you could also sort of compare it to Hannibal in that it's this sort of killer and law enforcer sort of circling each other in this obsessive dance with vaguely homoerotic overtones. It's not quite like that either, because I don't think it's framed quite as melodramatically. I think what's kind of interesting is that they have this sort of obsession with each other, but it's not framed quite as sort of, I don't know, operatically, I guess. It's not, I don't know, it never quite comes across as star-crossed love. It more comes across as them both having a sort of a little preoccupation or a little crush. And I guess I shouldn't spoil how the show ends, but that's how it goes.
Yeah.
And the show and the characters seem broadly aware of that.
Yeah, and it sort of builds slowly over time. They've got 8 episodes, and that's kind of one of the main running sort of interpersonal conflicts. From the beginning, I wasn't aware this is the direction the show was going to go in.
Yeah, there's the relationship between Eve and her husband, which, I mean, to be honest, is possibly one of the more stereotypical relationships on the show, because, as you say, you've had shows like Spooks, which have done, oh dear, the spy's personal life is taking a beating because she's too busy chasing the baddie or doing her job. And, I think there is some effort made to make it clear that, she does actually love her husband, and her husband, even if he is not the most exciting man in the world, is not being unreasonably a petulant dick about it, I mean, you want Eve to continue on her spy mission because, well, partly because that's what the plot needs for it to continue, and partly because, it's fun.
The relationship with the husband is an interesting one because it's part of the ordinariness of it that she has, an ordinary relationship with, a fairly ordinary person. But I was a little disappointed by the plot with the husband because I just knew exactly where it was going, and it's kind of the plot in almost every other BBC or ITV drama. It's every domestic subplot must basically involve a marriage or a home breaking down. It's I remember a few years ago there was that drama that ITV did about Fred and Mae West called Responsible Adult, and it just really, really stood out that they had a subplot, about the woman character. Obviously, the main plot was about this woman and her connection to the Wests, who, for those who don't know, were famous British serial killers. And then there's a subplot about her domestic life, and it's there for no reason, that for some reason her personal relationship with her husband breaks down. And it's almost every TV drama seems to feel the need to have a domestic subplot where things break down. I just felt that, at this point, it is a little tiring. And it was quite obvious exactly where this plot was going.
Yeah, I mean, this is turning it briefly towards a criticism I sort of made earlier. Yeah, the thing with Killing Eve is it's doing everything with a lot of charm and a lot of zest and a lot of very, very well-written dialogue. But the things it's doing are often quite standard. I mean, I get the feeling we're trying to do this without too much aggressive spoiling.
Yeah.
But there are various big plot turns throughout the series. I guess I probably shouldn't even hint at them because they are, in their own way, part of the fun. But there are a few big plot turns throughout the series. You can sort of tick them off in your head. It's yes, that's what would happen at this point in this kind of story. Yes, and then that. And also that. Oh, and that too. It's all very, very well written. But I kept waiting for it to aggressively subvert its genre. Maybe I'd just been reading too many glowing reviews. I was expecting something, that really broke the spy thriller down to pieces and reassembled them in an exciting new way. But no, it's just a really, really well written standard spy thriller.
I think actually, you just kind of hit the nail on the head of something that I've been wondering about the show, which is the thing I found slightly disappointing about it was exactly that. I was waiting for it to do something interesting to subvert the spy drama. But again, without wanting to spoil anything, the twists are very predictable. I think pretty much every twist that came, I had guessed before it came. There was very little surprise in the plot. Obviously, what you were there for is for the characters and the kind of ordinary charm of it all.
Well, yeah, as some childhood nursery I once said, it ain't what they do, it's the way that they do it. And yes, they do it in a very, very constantly funny, constantly likeable way. And obviously, from a representation standpoint, one of the reasons I'm sure why this show has been particularly well received on the critical internet, the fact that it has women in almost all the major roles, including roles they don't often get to play, like the cool assassin and the messy every person and the cool boss. You'll often occasionally get a woman in, one of those roles, but having women in all three of them is interesting and unusual and good.
Yeah, that's one of the ways it does subvert the tropes of the spy drama. And there's a lot of really great sort of characterization. Obviously there's the main characters, but even a lot of the supporting cast, they all have little things that kind of really bring them to life. Again, it's the sort of the focus on the ordinariness. Every character has a sort of mannerism, or not even they have subplots, but there's just the characters feel very real in the sense that they spent time really crafting a whole range of individual people, including the other people who work in MI6 with Eve, or Villanelle's handler and people like that. They're all interesting, really watchable characters.
Yeah, so I like seeing David Haig turn up playing a likeable character because I've been seeing him play arseholes since I was about 12. Pretty sure one of the first times I saw him on TV. No, not the first, but I remember he played a lot of wanker bosses, and then when I was about 18, he turned up in an Alan Bennett thing playing a paedophile. So yeah, it's nice that he's finally got to play a straight up nice bloke.
Yeah, that is good. That is good. One other thing I really liked about it, I'm going to try and say this without any spoilers because I don't really want to spoil, is that what I liked about it is as they dig into the character of Villanelle, they've avoided what Paddy Chayefsky called the rubber ducky moment. I've been reading about dramatic structure and things like that recently, and writing techniques, and the rubber ducky moment is basically a thing that a lot of bad writers fall into, and it's something to avoid. And they quite deftly avoided it here. What it is basically, at some point you usually get a bit when the villain says at some point, basically, the hero is like, why are you doing this? And the villain goes, well, when I was 5, someone took my rubber ducky away. And since then I've always hated people. It's just a really stupid kind of one-off explanation to why this person's bad. And whatever it is, because what the things that shape us and make us who we are like complex. And, take place over a long period of time. And they're probably too complex to dig for a film or a book or even like an 8-hour TV show to dig into. So writers simplify them. And I think they did a really good job here of avoiding that. I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler to say, but I was sitting there the whole time. It's like, I'm really going to lose patience with this show if they reveal Villanelle's rubber ducky moment. There's basically, at one point this one thing happened and that's why she's now a psychopathic assassin, which they quite deftly avoided. They go into her backstory and it is really interesting how they reveal more and more about her character, but they did a good job of not having like a really sort of hackneyed summing it all up in kind of one sentence.
Yeah, no, they did avoid that. I too did sort of keep going through the show expecting it, especially there's a point in the final episode where I sort of fully expected a bit more sort of, and that's when I decided to become a fucking lunatic, as people do. Although I did at times wonder if they'd kind of gone the other way and made her a slightly sort of standard TV sociopath. It's like, I just kill people. Why? Because I like it. Cool. Yeah. Are you like the Joker? Yes. Right. Yeah, fortunately, I think Jodie Comer is sufficiently charismatic, but I don't think it went too much like that in an annoying way.
And I also think you're right that it's Jodie Comer's performance that makes the character. The character is an interesting and well-written character, but what makes it is the way that she plays the character in such an interesting way. I think if it had been someone less talented playing that part, the show wouldn't be as good, because she needs to be able to nail that, the likeableness and sort of the intrigue of the character, but also the kind of terrifying sociopathy.
Yeah, they've renewed it for a second season, which part of me wonders if there's really any need for it. There are bits and bobs throwing forward to a possible second season, but I'm a bit sort of, would this be a great, perfect first season in its own right? Well, perfect might be the wrong word because I've clearly criticised it, but yeah, I don't know. I did not come away thinking what this definitely needs is a second season, but I will reserve judgment till that actually.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're trying to avoid spoilers, but one of the criticisms I would say is I was a bit disappointed with the end. I guess if I articulate how disappointed I was, there will be a spoiler, unless you want to do a thing of, at this point there'll be spoilers.
I have actually got a couple of notes on that, so yeah, do you want to do that?
Okay, so we highly recommend you watch Killing Eve. If you've not seen it, go watch it and skip to the next segment. Timestamps are in the description. If you have seen it and want to find out our thoughts on the ending, or aren't going to watch it and want to find out our thoughts on the ending, stick with us. Spoiler warning, last chance. Okay, so the ending of the show itself is it comes down to a sort of a showdown, as you'd expect, between Villanelle and Eve, and it looks like they're sort of going to team up or have an affair or run away together, and then at the last minute Eve betrays Villanelle and stabs her. But then Villanelle escapes, and the twist is she's still out there and now probably wants to kill Eve. And I must say, I just felt that a bit of a cop-out. I'd much preferred if they just had a definitive ending.
I was quite disappointed Villanelle wasn't dead, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think they should have just killed Villanelle right at the end, and it would have been really sad and tragic.
Yeah, if they did really want to end the whole show, I wouldn't have entirely minded if Villanelle had managed to kill Eve in the sort of final flailing shootout. I mean, it would have been a bit of a bummer, but it would have been an ending.
Yeah. Or they should have at least killed Villanelle, because if they want to have a second series, the second series should be Eve investigating the 12. And then, again, if you want to add the psychological dimension, sort of haunted by what she's done, by, killing this person she was obsessed with. But keeping Villanelle around for the second series, I just think it's going to get a bit feel like they're spinning it out.
I don't know. I mean, it's, as I say, it's basically all comes down to how they do it. I am a little concerned this is going to become not killing Damian Lewis at the end of season 1 of Homeland.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
I'm sure it seemed like a good idea at the time because he was clearly doing a great performance and was one of the big magnetic parts of the show, but they'd done his character. There was nothing left to do with him, and keeping him alive just spun it out and it was pretty clear it was an enormous mistake by the end of the following season. So, I don't know, I kind of wish they'd either killed Villanelle or just had both of them die in a flailing, stabby shootout and let the show end there, but they did not do for those things. Although having said that, having been mildly critical, I did think the actual last sequence, right up to the bit where Villanelle escaped, was pretty electrifying. I've given the show a little bit of gentle shit over the course of the last however long it's been for not subverting my expectations and being fairly straightforward. But during those last 5 minutes or so, I had no idea what was going to happen. Fair enough.
Yeah, the very end is very good, which is, I thought interesting because although I did really like the show, I thought the best bit is probably around the middle bit, sort of episode 4 or 5. I think the episode that takes place in the sort of small English village with the sort of the shootout and chase through the sort of kind of the lanes of some made up place in England. That was probably the height of it. I think that's probably the episode that's on TV next. So I don't know why you're listening to the spoiler part if you're following it on actual TV, but the next episode is a good one.
It was on American TV months ago, so yeah.
And it's all on iPlayer, obviously.
Also true.
But I kind of felt that was the best bit, and then the second half, although it was still good, in the Russian prison, and then it was sort of chase across Moscow itself. I mean, it was good, but I kind of felt it had lost something of the kind of the high tension that it had in the middle. But then at the end, it did really pull it together in the last few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I think the weaker part of Killing Eve is the spy stuff as opposed to the sort of character stuff. And when it unavoidably sort of took them off really into the heart of the spy stuff in the last 3 episodes or so, it did get a bit not as good, but it was still pretty good. And if we're doing spoiler complaints, I did feel like the bit in episode 3 where her mate, played by, as I mentioned earlier, the unusually good David Haig, good as in unusually playing a sympathetic character. He's always a good actor. I know that part of the appeal of this show is that they're meant to be, recognisably human, but why did he try and follow Villanelle when he knew she'd been following Eve all day and he'd been with Eve? Surely he must have known that she'd definitely recognise him.
Yeah.
I don't often watch these sort of shows thinking, Jesus Christ, you fucking moron. But that was a bit of a, okay, you're being so unwise that it's actually... I was under the impression you were meant to be better at your job than this. I mean, I guess maybe the point is that he's meant to be an office guy who isn't meant to be out in the field following people. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we were saying before, which is that, the sort of twists and turns along the way are fairly predictable. At that point, I was like, okay, he's the sort of lovable mentorish figure, so he's going to die probably around the middle of the story. About this point, we're going to reveal there's a spy inside MI6, and about this point, there's going to be another twist. In each time, they were fairly predictable, and you could see exactly what's going to happen. But as you say, we're not here for the spy reveals. If you want twists that were really catch you by surprise, then go see Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, or something that's written purely for a spy thriller. Whereas this is very much, I don't know, this is a workplace drama that just so happens to be a spy drama.
Yeah. Think of it like a Marvel movie. Strong, memorable, charming characters over slightly standard plots.
Yeah, that's a good summary.
See, I mentioned Marvel films again. Sorry.
Hello, you right?
I'm back. I'm looking at Twitter.
How was Twitter today?
My friend finally got his copy of the Bat Dick comic, so that's exciting.
Is he spending all day enjoying the Bat Dick?
I think so. He's made the trouble to do a tweet about it, so...
I can't, but so now they're never going to do it ever again. They're like, never again.
I think they have delayed the following issue by about 3 months to redraw it, because apparently it contains more Bat Dicks.
They're going to do it in this... Is it like a thing every episode, every issue must contain the Bat Dick?
Well, not anymore.
Yeah, was that the original plan? If they were shit, we need to redraw this. Why? It's got 36 pictures of Batman's penis in it.
Exactly. The last one had 2 pictures of Batman's penis, so that's destroyed everything. So.
Yeah, it's our plan for the number of Batwangs in each issue to grow exponentially was really a bad idea. By the 8th episode, there'll be 64.
There was a story on Bleeding Cool yesterday, New York Comic-Con bar gossip. Apparently, DC Comics creators are annoyed because they're getting a lot more intervention from corporate saying, this might be controversial, please remove that swear word, or slight sex reference, or glimpse of buttock, because they don't want it to be the next Bat Dick. Not only do we want to remove all the subsequent Bat Dicks, we want to remove any other possible scandals because Robin said the word crap.
Well, yeah, it's is that Superman's exposed buttocks?
All those, yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm sure it's not, angled straight up his arsehole, but still. Anyway, yeah, so that's what's happening. Comics continues to spasm in confused ecstasy over the exposure of the Bat Dick.
Oh well, you always say that, like, well, I'm just so surprised by everything that happens. Like, I can never predict what's going to happen next. But yeah, like, internet has meltdown over Batman's penis. It's not something I would have seen coming.
That's why it's so terrifying. No one was prepared for our glimpse of the Batpole. So, yeah, coming up with funny names for Batman's penis has basically taken up everyone's time for the last few weeks.
Yeah.
I think the winners are still between Batawang and Lil Wayne, but...
Lil Wayne is the best. So.
Okay.
That's my opinion. I don't know how much this is going to stay in the final podcast.
I thought the entire after-credit sequence will just be 5 minutes of waffle about Batman's cock.
Well, we haven't covered it on the podcast yet, have we?
For some reason, we did not do a whole episode about the exposure of the Bat Dick, no.
We should have done like an excessive fantasy violence or something like that.
That is probably the place for it, to be honest.
Yeah, or the place for all of this. Do you want to talk about another famous penis, i.e. James Bond? Next up on this episode, we're going to be discussing what can James Bond learn from Killing Eve. The last James Bond film came out just before we did this podcast, I think, in 2015. So I don't think we've covered any James Bond films so far. The last one, Spectre, in my opinion, wasn't very good. And I do get the feeling that Bond is sort of, languishing a bit, sort of maybe in search of a new feeling or a new direction, especially as, Spectre wasn't very much a disappointment. And Killing Eve, although it didn't subvert or do anything interesting with spy tropes, it did, to a degree, feel fresh and original. I felt it had a different take on spy drama, or at least a take that hasn't been around for a while. So, is Killing Eve what James Bond needs? What can James Bond learn from the success of Killing Eve? Nick, do you have any thoughts on this?
I don't think you can have a James Bond who has a relatable Killing Eve-esque, well, Eve from Killing Eve-esque, I suppose, life, because I think that would not be James Bond. But then again, is the problem that we don't want James Bond to be James Bond anymore because we want all our heroes to be relatable? Or should we, put James Bond in a Killing Eve-esque environment, but leave James Bond as James Bond and allow everyone else to be more relatable?
Yeah.
I mean, could you drop James Bond into an episode of Killing Eve wherein Eve and everyone else are kind of his background staff? Obviously, that's a bit of a disservice to Sandra Oh and the rest of the actors playing them. But, could you have this environment where MI6 itself is a more normal workplace rather than a super cool spy place, and James Bond is this sort of weapon they unleash? To be honest, I suspect the problem with that is I think you get complaints from the hardcore fans that it was no longer as awesome. Yeah,
I think there's something in the way that Jodie Comer plays Villanelle is very much inspired by Bond, or at least the Daniel Craig take on Bond. That Daniel Craig's take on Bond is, Bond is a psychopath who likes hurting people. That's why he does what he does. Obviously, Villanelle's found, like, James Bond does in a very stoic, manly way, and Jodie Comer, and probably with the help of Phoebe Waller-Bridge and others, has found a take on the character that is, a take on the kind of psychopathic assassin that is different to the sort of stoic, cold James Bond character. But you can see there's a core to the performance that has a lot in common. There's the idea that these people aren't good or nice. They're nasty people down right at their core.
See, the problem with modern Bond, though, is did they actually stick with that? I mean, is that still an element that's present by the time you get to, like, Skyfall and Spectre? Or was that just what people liked about Casino Royale?
What they tried to do is a bit of both, is that they started with Bond as like a psychopath. He's sort of supposed to be dangerous and not sort of glamorous. Or, like, he uses the sort of the glamour in a sort of as part of the kind of, the mask he wears to cover up the fact that he's a psychopath, which I think that's quite an interesting sort of take on James Bond. And if we want things to be more like psychologically and emotionally complex, that's the kind of level of psychological complexity I think that a Bond film needs. I did get disappointed when they then started going deeper and started bringing in like Bond's parents and childhood. I did like Skyfall as a film, but I didn't like how they revealed, his childhood home and things about his parents and stuff. Yeah, I just felt it kind of went against the kind of nature of the character in that Bond's not really supposed to be a person. He's just, like you say, he's like a weapon that gets unleashed. And, throughout the 60s to the 90s and 2000s, the take has basically been, wouldn't it be cool to be basically, the Terminator? And then Daniel Craig managed to find a way, and it's in vogue with what we expect from our films now. He found a way to make it a bit more psychologically complex. They're like, no, he's actually cold and emotionless. And in Skyfall, when him and the Javier Bardem character are shooting whiskey off the top of the woman's head, and she's clearly absolutely terrified, and Bond just doesn't care, and he says a line, waste of good whiskey. That's quite clever, because A, it's the sort of thing Bond says, but at that point, you can see that actually this is quite unpleasant, that, this woman is really, really scared, and Bond just doesn't care. That's the sort of psychological complexity that we want. Yeah, whereas I felt they kind of ruined it by, especially in Spectre, when they went into Bond's like childhood and things like that and had all sorts of ridiculous twists about his backstory. That kind of level of making Bond a real person is not what I want from James Bond.
Too much rubber ducky for you.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah, exactly. It was just too much of like, it's trying to explain what is probably unexplainable. Which Killing Eve does a good job of making these things seem more realistic. I think maybe you're right that like it's just hard to put James Bond into something that's as believable as Killing Eve.
I mean, I think you could put Bond in as a sort of contrast to those characters. Like, you know, he's there, but everyone's sort of a bit scared of him and sort of skirts around him. But if you make him this kind of the office weirdo, then I don't know if that would vibe with what people want from James Bond. Like,
yeah, exactly.
You're meant to sort of want to be him, I guess. As you say, maybe Daniel Craig has already taken a bit of a dump on that. In which case, yes, maybe you could go further and make a James Bond series in which James Bond is feared and slightly disliked by everyone he works with. But I suspect people would see that as slightly too harsh a take on the brand.
Yeah. I mean, I always think that the Daniel Craig one, his take on Bond is a little bit having your cake and eating it. Is that Bond gets to still be a psychopath and say cool lines and be awful for the Bond fans who just want Bond to drive around in a cool car and, like, you know, be nasty to people. And also they get to kind of say to the people who are basically like, is this really what we want from our pop culture in the 21st century? You know, glorifying violence and psychopathy. And then at the moment Daniel Craig goes, actually, it's an intelligent commentary on whether we want this from our pop culture. I get the feeling that a lot of the hardcore Bond fans don't like it when Daniel Craig says things like Bond's an awful psychopath, but they can handily ignore that and just watch the films and pretend like, you know, it's not supposed to be a commentary. So it is a bit having your cake and eating it.
Well, yeah, but that's a lot of anti-heroes everywhere, to be honest. I mean, how much of The Punisher really works when you take into account that it's trying to both go, The Punisher is a dreadful serial killer, but isn't it cool when he blows people away with AK-15s?
Yeah.
AK-47s, AR-15s, but one of those.
A weird hybrid of the two and something awful.
Yeah, the hybrid mega gun, which, to be honest, if it existed, the Punisher would definitely have.
Yeah, no, I think the Punisher is a very apt comparison in this regard. There's that similar dichotomy, which is if you use the really cool, badass psychopath to explore what it really means to be a cool, badass psychopath, do people look at it and go, isn't it cool to be a badass psychopath? Whereas I think with the Villanelle character, there is a degree to which... I mean, I'm sure lots of people look at her and go like, oh, that it would be cool to be like her. But I don't think they don't quite go to extent as James Bond. But maybe there's lots of people out there who, especially like maybe female viewers, who are basically like, finally we get a psychopathic super assassin that we can identify with. And it's probably about time that I guess there was some gender parity in that regard.
As I say, the cool, badass anti-hero, where the writers clearly both know he's awful, but also want you to be able to go, yeah, fuck him up. You know, I don't think we can singly blame James Bond for that phenomenon. That's basically everywhere. I mean, even Dr. House is basically that. Yes, the show makes sure to acknowledge that he's a broken, sad shell of a man, but he's still, you know, funny and cool. So, you know, it is what it is. That's what they do on television. Show us tragic, complete arseholes, and then make it clear that they know they're an arsehole, but also don't want to lose the scene where they get to be funny and cool.
Yeah.
So, you know, I feel James Bond is probably going to keep doing that. I mean, some of the comics recently in James Bond have actually been a bit more upfront about what a dick he is, basically, and have made the violence a bit more sort of grim, real violence rather than cool James Bond violence. They've got some good writers as well. Kieran Gillen, Warren Ellis, good people. Kieran Gillen wrote a James Bond comic which tried to address Brexit, which was interesting.
It does sound ambitious.
It was ambitious, especially it was a one-off story as well. But yeah, it was pretty good. Again, I'm not sure whether the multi-million-pound movie franchise would want to take a punt on any of that, to be honest, which is probably kind of the problem. There might be more chance of them, you know, bringing in a sort of Killing Eve vibe and turning it into a sort of background office comedy, or at least, you know, maybe moving a level removed from James Bond. Because I mean, a lot of these franchises, the new one is often a reaction to what's perceived to have not worked about the recent ones. And I might be wrong, but I get the feeling that what's perceived to have not worked about the last one or two is too much fucking humanising James Bond. I get the feeling that by the time you got to Spectre, a film which, full disclosure, I have not seen, because everyone seemed to fucking hate it. Was that about his secret brother or something?
Yeah, I mean, again, spoilers for Spectre, but it came out as about 3 or 4 years ago. But anyway, is that they reveal that, like, Blofeld is secretly James Bond's brother, or, like, after James Bond's parents dies, Blofeld's family adopted him, or something like that. But anyway, Blofeld's his brother, and it's...
That could eat a bag of dicks, obviously.
Yeah.
But the point is, I think because people might be a bit sick of all that now, maybe the time is right for a film which puts James Bond back at a remote and puts the focus on the relatable office stuff.
Yeah. You're completely right that, like, James Bond, each film is sort of a reaction to what didn't work well the one before it. And also, James Bond kind of goes in cycles. I mean, it's quite obvious. The cycle is whenever they change the actor who plays Bond. And when a new Bond comes along, there's a new take, and obviously it's a reaction to what didn't work about the previous Bond, especially didn't work like the previous Bond's last films. But also, it's usually a reaction to stuff that seemed cool and interesting that happened in between the previous cycle of Bond going shit. I do feel that Killing Eve could fit into this process. So just to describe it, like Bond kind of goes around in a circle, usually from new Bond comes in and they have something that's relatively believable, spy film by the standards of the day, and it kind of shrinks down into ridiculousness with each iteration. So Pierce Brosnan sort of reinvents Bond for the 90s, and GoldenEye, it's in the sort of, post-Cold War Bond. They get progressively worse. The Brosnan ones with the terrible Die Another Day, which could be the worst Bond film, and that's really is saying something. Then obviously it gets rebooted with a new direction and Daniel Craig in Casino Royale. But in between, you get the Jason Bourne film, or the first one, The Bourne Identity, which kind of really takes a spy drama that is back to believability, even though it's about, again, similar to Killing Eve, sort of international assassins and things like that. But Bourne was very much a believable spy thriller compared to Die Another Day, which was just utterly ridiculous. And also you had Batman Begins, the idea of we'll take this iconic character that everyone knows very well, and we'll go back to their origins to find out what made them the person they are, and in do so making them seem more like a believable person who could exist, rather than this kind of character that's either iconic or just so far-fetched no one could believe it. And then those things kind of get packaged into Casino Royale, which is a very good film, which then has the grittiness and sort of believability of the action and the plot that Bourne has, and the kind of psychological introspection that Batman Begins had. And it's kind of an interesting package. And then they kind of, Quantum of Solace isn't quite as good, and then Skyfall they thought was good, but then kind of has taken some of the stuff a bit too far, and then Inspector, it's bad again. And I kind of feel that now, I know they're doing another one with Daniel Craig, and maybe even two more with Daniel Craig, I'm not sure.
Didn't he do a load of interviews when the last one came out, basically sounding like he wanted to quit more than anything in the world?
Yeah, but I think there's something to do with his contract, but I don't know.
Was that a negotiating tactic?
Well, because there was this rumour that Spectre was going to be a part one, and was going to end with a big cliffhanger, kind of like Avengers Infinity War did. And it was going to be a two-part story, but I guess maybe it was just so bad that they just jettisoned that idea. But I know they are doing another one with Daniel Craig, but I do kind of feel at this point that they need Bond's probably due a reset and a new Bond and a new direction. And maybe, like I say, just like they learned from what was successful and different and cool and interesting in between Die Another Day and Casino Royale, what would be good is now to learn from things like Killing Eve, and if I think about it, probably some other spy dramas that are doing something interesting with the spy film whilst Bond has gone to shit. So if Bond wants to regain his crown as king of the spies, he needs to learn from what some of the successful upstarts have been doing.
Well, yeah, the Bourne franchise seems to have trailed off and died, so it's probably time to stop copying them.
Exactly, yeah, but something like Killing Eve, again, in a world after Spectre, Killing Eve was such a refreshing breath of quality into the spy drama, just as in a world after Die Another Day, The Bourne Identity was such a refreshing breath of quality back into the spy genre. And obviously Bond's been say the king of the spies, will just take what other people are successfully doing, package it into Bond, and then sell it in a future film.
Yeah, as I say, I think it would be a difficult transition, and it would require making possibly a different type of film. But at this stage, yeah. They're probably just going to make another classic Bond film where he just fights a dude, aren't they? So I don't know what I'm really talking about, but who knows? Maybe they're watching Killing Eve. I'm not a close follower of the spy genre, but it seems to be one of the only spy things that has broken into my cultural bubble in quite a while. Yeah,
it's definitely the breakout hit, which is why I think that if it's redefining the spy genre, or at least breathing some quality into the genre, then that's something that Bond could certainly learn from.
Yeah, Bond is not a franchise I auto-see, to be honest, as you might be able to detect the fact that I just didn't bother seeing Spectre because no one seemed to like it. Bond is very much something I turn up to when I get invited because someone I know is going, or when the new one actually gets good reviews. Whether I turn up to the next Bond may well depend on whether they learn anything from Killing Eve, to be honest.
Yeah, Killing Eve isn't the first spy film to kind of interject this sort of sense of ordinariness. It really reminded me of the Harry Palmer films. They're the films starring Michael Caine as a MI5 spy called Harry Palmer. There's 3 films they made. The Ipcris File, probably the most famous, and the first one. Then there's Ice Station Zebra and Funeral in Berlin were the 3. And they were created very much as a reaction to James Bond into the original James Bond films in the 1960s, in that Harry Palmer works in a fairly boring office and argues with his boss. There's lots of shots of him going to the supermarket and things like that, whereas Bond has this kind of casino lifestyle. So it's not the first time that people have got together and created something in reaction to the ridiculousness of Bond that's more believable.
Yeah, I think you just need to create something which is both believable but also actually exciting and vaguely credible. Like, just doing a parody version of Bond is kind of... That's not going to replace Bond in the culture. That's just going to make everyone look back at Bond again.
They're not supposed to be like a parody. It's more like a reaction to it, a kind of, you know, a response to say that, like, to the unreality of Bond is something... respond with something that's more believable, and that's what Killing Eve is doing. So maybe it's not that they can learn from each other, it's just they need to sort of exist side by side as kind of in relation to each other, just as Harry Palmer did next to the Sean Connery Bonds.
Yeah, I mean, have they even started filming the next Bond? We're not going to know if any of this is true until about 2020.
Yeah, it's coming out in 2020, I believe, the next James Bond film.
And it's still got Daniel Craig in it?
I think so for now.
Wow. Okay, well, if the podcast is still going by then, maybe you'll hear our opinions on it.
Or if Killing Eve is still going at that point.
As I say, I'm a little wary about multiple series of that, so who knows if we'll still be as positive about Killing Eve by now. Okay, that was Moderate Fantasy Violence. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this show, you can find out even more things related to it by going to moderatefantasyviolence.com. I believe since the last episode, Alistair has published a bonus essay about the whole Predator thing. So if you want to read even more thoughts on that, and even more thoughts on other things too, then go along to moderatefantasyviolence.com and get stuck in. Or if you want to make our lives better and happier, you can also go to iTunes, or probably a lot of podcast hosting things, and leave us a nice 5-star review. Thank you.
You can also find us on Twitter, where we are at MFV Podcast, or you can search for Moderate Fantasy Violence. And we're on Facebook, where you can search for Moderate Fantasy Violence, and you'll see our purple logo. I've been Alistair Ball. You can find me on Twitter at AlistairJRBall, and you can find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com.
And I've been Nick Bryan. You can find more about me at nickbryan.com. If all goes well, I will have a comic about skeletons, drawn by the excellent artist Rosie Alexander, coming out probably around the time the next episode drops, if not slightly before. So yeah, if you're excited by the notion of a comic about skeletons, and the art is gorgeous, by the way, if nothing else, get it for the pretty pictures. Rosie's nailed it. Yeah, that should be coming soon. I'm pretty excited. I will probably talk about that at slightly more length next time, assuming it's all happened. And yes, you can also follow me on Twitter at NickMB for probably even more up-to-the-minute updates about the release of that comic. And the rest of the outro. And we'll be back in 2 weeks, where I believe we are scheduled to cover the first couple of episodes of the new Jodie Whittaker season of Doctor Who. We will see you there in a couple of weeks for that. Bye-bye.
Bye. Shall I kick us off?
Yes, we actually need to go talk about the actual thing, don't
we?
Yeah, sure.
Or we could talk more about the Lil Wayne for a bit. It's up to you.
No, I think we've covered it. Much like DC are currently doing an issue 2 of that Batman comic.
From now on, yes, the internet is ensured that Lil Wayne is fully covered.
Yeah, I think the funny part is, I don't think anyone was actually that appalled. It was just, they just don't want the entire of the internet to be laughing and going, ha ha, bat dick at them.
Which was entirely what was going to happen from the start. I mean,
I know, maybe they thought because Batman's famously grim and gritty, we'd all take it seriously, but
no.
Little did they know, penises are impossible to take seriously.
Even Batman, we found the limit to how seriously you could take Batman, which is when he gets his knob out.
Jesus Christ. Alright. Truly, this is the well of infinite content.
Okay. Right. Drink of water. Let's see if we can be sensible for about 30 seconds.